The planet was silent, save for the faint rustling of alien grass swaying in the wind. Princess Lysara crouched beside her damaged spacecraft, her glowing blue skin casting soft light over the wreckage. She sighed heavily, frustration bubbling beneath her calm exterior. Her people weren't built for failure, especially not someone like her, a royal heir trained to lead with grace and precision. But here she was, stranded on an uncharted world, miles away from the Xylith Empire's borders, alone. Lysara's bioluminescent markings flickered faintly as she scanned the horizon. The air smelled strange, sharp and metallic, unlike anything on her home planet. Her telepathic senses stretched out cautiously, searching for signs of life. At first, there was nothing but the hum of insects and distant creatures scuttling through the underbrush. Then, abruptly, something stirred. A presence that wasn't animalistic or mindless. It was intelligent, and it was approaching fast. Her heart quickened, though outwardly she remained composed. Drawing herself up to her full height, Lysara turned toward the sound, her slender fingers brushing against the hilt of her energy blade. If this unknown being meant harm, she would defend herself. But deep down, she doubted even her advanced weapons could protect her indefinitely. This was their territory, after all. What emerged from the shadows, however, wasn't what she expected. A figure stepped into view, a human male, tall and wiry, with tan skin and tousled brown hair. He wore simple clothes smeared with dirt, evidence of long days spent outdoors. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of her luminous form, but instead of fear or hostility, his expression softened into one of fascination. "You're not from around here," he said finally, breaking the silence. His voice carried no malice, only curiosity. Lysara tensed, unsure how to respond. Humans were rare in this part of the galaxy, often dismissed by more advanced civilizations as primitive and reckless. Yet this man didn't seem either of those things. His demeanor was calm, almost disarming. Still, caution ruled her instincts. "And you are?" She replied coolly, keeping her distance. "Kel," he answered, taking a step closer. When she stiffened, he stopped, raising his hand slightly to show he meant no harm. "I'm a researcher. I've been studying this planet's ecosystem for years." Lysara tilted her head, intrigued despite herself. "You live here, alone?" He nodded. "Yeah, just me and the bugs. Well, until now." A small smile tugged at his lips. For a moment, Lysara forgot her predicament. How could someone so fragile survive in such isolation? What drove him to explore a place so far removed from his own kind? Questions flooded her mind, but before she could ask any, Kale gestured toward her ship. "That yours?" he asked, his tone light but genuine. "Looks like you've had a rough landing." "It's none of your concern," she snapped, regretting the harshness in her voice almost immediately. To her surprise, Kale didn't flinch. Instead, he shrugged. "Fair enough. But if you need help fixing it, I might be able to lend a hand." Lysara stared at him, baffled. Why would a human offer assistance to someone like her? Was he naive? Or worse, did he have ulterior motives? Despite her skepticism, a small part of her wanted to believe him. After all, she couldn't repair the ship alone. "Why would you help me?" she asked bluntly, narrowing her glowing eyes. Kale hesitated for a moment, then smiled again. "Because everyone deserves a second chance, even strangers who crash land on my doorstep." His words caught her off guard. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not even her own people. For the first time since arriving on this strange planet, Lysara felt a flicker of hope. Days turned into weeks as Lysara and Kale worked tirelessly to repair the spacecraft. Slowly but surely, progress was made. Wires were reconnected, damaged panels replaced, and the engine hummed back to life with a low, steady thrum. Yet despite their growing success, Lysara couldn't shake the unease that lingered in the back of her mind. Every glance at Kale only deepened her confusion. Why did he stay? Why did he care? One evening, As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Lysera sat alone by the edge of a small stream, staring at her reflection in the water. Her bioluminescent markings shimmered faintly, a stark contrast against the darkening surroundings. She had always been proud of her heritage, of the legacy she carried as a Xylith princess, but now, for the first time, she felt trapped by it. "Something on your mind?" Kel's voice broke through her thoughts. He approached cautiously, sitting down beside her without waiting for an invitation. Lysera hesitated before speaking. "Do you ever wonder why we're here?" Kale chuckled softly. "All the time. It's kind of my thing, to ask questions, look for answers." She shook her head. "No, I mean, why are you helping me? What do you gain from this?" He tilted his head, studying her intently. "Gain? Nothing, really. I just saw someone who needed help. That's all. But I'm not one of your kind," she pressed, her tone sharper than she intended. "I'm an alien, a stranger. Why would you trust me so easily?" Kale leaned back, resting his elbows on the ground behind him. "Because you're still a person," he said simply. "Doesn't matter where you come from or what you look like. You're trying to survive, same as anyone else." His words struck a chord within her, stirring emotions she wasn't prepared to confront. For years, she'd been taught to see humans as inferior, unworthy of attention or respect. Yet Kale treated her as an equal, not out of obligation, but because it seemed natural to him. Still, the weight of her duty pressed heavily on her shoulders. When the ship was repaired, she would have to leave. And then what? Would she simply return to her empire, forget about this strange human who had shown her kindness, or would she dare to bring him with her? "You wouldn't understand," she murmured finally, breaking the silence. "Try me," Kale replied, his voice gentle yet firm. Lysera sighed, tracing patterns in the dirt with her finger. "In my world, there are rules, expectations. As a princess, I'm meant to marry someone of noble blood, a Xylith leader chosen by my council. It's tradition. My people depend on it. And you're afraid they won't accept me," Kale finished for her. She nodded, avoiding his gaze. "It's more than that. They might see you as a threat, an outsider who doesn't belong. Bringing you to my empire could put both of us in danger." Kale was silent for a moment, digesting her words. Then he spoke, his tone measured but resolute. "If that's true, if going back means risking everything, then maybe it's worth asking yourself what matters most. Is it your duty to follow tradition? Or is it finding something, or someone, that makes you feel alive?" Lysera froze, his question echoing in her mind. She had spent her entire life preparing for the throne, sacrificing personal desires for the sake of her people. But now, faced with the possibility of leaving Kel behind, she realized how empty that future felt without him in it. "I don't know what to do," she admitted quietly, her voice trembling. Kale reached out, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You don't have to figure it out right now. Just promise me one thing." "What's that?" "That you'll choose what feels right, not what others expect of you." For the first time, Lysera allowed herself to imagine a different path, one where she didn't have to conform to rigid traditions, where she could forge her own destiny alongside someone who truly understood her. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and completely foreign. But as she looked at Kel, she began to believe that perhaps, just maybe, it was possible. The council chamber was tense, the air thick with unspoken accusations and simmering anger. Lysera stood beside Kale, her posture regal but her hands clenched tightly at her sides. She could feel the weight of every gaze in the room, some curious, others hostile, all directed at the human who dared to defy centuries of tradition. Councillor Drevik, his face flushed with indignation, pointed a finger at Kull. "This outsider has no place among us. He is a threat to our empire's stability." Before anyone else could speak, Kale stepped forward again, his voice calm but firm. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here because Princess Lysera trusted me enough to bring me." If you want to judge me, fine, but do it fairly." His words hung in the air, daring the council to challenge him further. Lysera felt a surge of admiration for his courage, though her heart pounded with worry. One wrong move, and this fragile situation could spiral out of control. Emperor Thaler leaned back in his chair, studying Kale with piercing eyes. "Fairness," he said slowly, "is not something we often grant of outsiders. But if my daughter believes you are worthy, then perhaps you deserve a chance to prove yourself." Lysera exhaled softly, relief washing over her. Her father's words were measured, but they carried a glimmer of hope. Still, she knew the council wouldn't let Kale walk away untested. Empress Serena spoke next, her tone softer but no less commanding. "We cannot make decisions based on emotion alone. Tradition demands proof of worthiness. If this human seeks acceptance, he must undergo the trials of unity." A murmur rippled through the chamber. The trials of unity were infamous, a series of challenges designed to test intelligence, strength, adaptability, and loyalty. Few non-zealots had ever attempted them, and even fewer had succeeded. Lysera turned to Kale, her expression conflicted. "You don't have to do this," she whispered urgently. "They're dangerous, and I won't blame you if you choose to leave." Kale met her gaze, his resolve unwavering. "I didn't come all this way just to give up now. Whatever these trials are, I'll face them, for you, and for the chance to show your people that humans aren't what they think." Though touched by his determination, Lysera couldn't shake the fear gnawing at her insides. She knew the trials weren't just about physical endurance. They were also psychological, probing weaknesses and testing limits. Could Kale truly withstand such scrutiny? The first trial took place in an arena filled with holographic obstacles. Kale had to navigate a labyrinth while solving complex puzzles under time pressure. To everyone's surprise, he excelled, using logic and creativity to overcome each challenge. Even Counselor Drevik grudgingly acknowledged his skill. The second trial tested physical strength. Kale faced off against a Xylith warrior in hand-to-hand combat. Though smaller and less experienced, he relied on agility and quick thinking to hold his own, earning respect from some of the guards who watched silently. But it was during the third trial, a simulation designed to expose hidden fears, that Kale truly shone. As he confronted visions of failure, isolation, and loss, he refused to succumb to despair. Instead, he drew strength from memories of Earth, reminding himself why he had chosen to stand by Lysera. When the trials ended, the council gathered once more to deliberate. Lysera waited anxiously, her mind racing with possibilities. Finally, Emperor Thaler addressed the room. "This human has proven himself capable," he declared, his voice carrying authority. "However, capability does not guarantee trust. There are still those among us who question his motives, and rightfully so." Just as Lysera opened her mouth to protest, Kale interrupted, his tone respectful but direct. "Your suspicions are understandable. But if you truly want to know my intentions, look beyond my actions. Look at how I've treated your daughter, with honesty, respect, and care. Isn't that what matters most?" The chamber fell silent, the truth of his words sinking in. For the first time, cracks began to form in the council's rigid beliefs, and as Lysera looked at Kale, she realized something profound. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for a future where their two worlds could coexist. No matter what happened next, she knew one thing for certain. She would stand by him, no matter the cost. The hum of Lysera's repaired spacecraft echoed through the clearing as she and Kale prepared for departure. For weeks, they had worked side by side, piecing together not just her ship but a fragile bond that neither fully understood. Yet now, standing on the threshold of leaving this strange planet behind, Lysera felt an overwhelming sense of dread creeping into her chest. What awaited them beyond the stars? Would Kale be ready for the challenges ahead? As if summoned by her thoughts, the distant roar of engines shattered the quiet morning air. Both Lysera and Kale turned sharply toward the sky, where a sleek Xylith patrol vessel descended like a predator circling its prey. A ship landed gracefully nearby, kicking up clouds of dust and debris. Moments later, a group of armored soldiers emerged, their glowing insignias marking them as members of the Imperial Guard. "Princess Lysara," one of the guards said sternly, bowing slightly. "We've been searching for you. Your absence has caused great concern among the council." Lysara straightened, her regal demeanor returning instantly. "I appreciate your efforts, Commander Valen, but I assure you, I was never in danger." Valen's gaze flicked briefly to Kale, lingering with barely concealed disdain. "And who is this individual?" Before Lysara could respond, Kale stepped forward, his expression calm but unwavering. "I'm Kale. I helped repair the princess's ship after it crashed here." Valen's lip curled slightly, his voice dripping with condescension. "A human. How? Unexpected." Kale ignored the insult, his focus remaining steady on Lysara. She caught his eye, silently pleading with him to let her handle this. Turning back to Valen, she spoke firmly. "Commander, Kale has proven himself invaluable during my time here. Without his assistance, I might still be stranded. He deserves recognition for his efforts." Valen raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "Recognition? Princess, he is a human, an outsider. His presence compromises our security protocols. If you wish to return to the Empire, he cannot accompany us." Lysara's heart sank. She had known this moment would come, yet hearing it aloud made it feel all the more real. "That decision is mine to make," she replied curtly, her tone sharp enough to silence any further objections, for now. During the journey back to the Zalith Empire, tension filled the air inside the patrol vessel. Lysara sat rigidly in her seat, avoiding both Kale's concerned glances and Valen's disapproving stares. Her mind raced with questions. Could she convince the council to accept Kal, or would they demand she abandon him entirely? When they finally arrived at the Imperial Palace, a sprawling structure of crystalline towers bathed in ethereal light, Lysara was greeted by the full weight of her responsibilities. The council chamber buzzed with murmurs as she entered, flanked by Kale and Valen. Her parents, Emperor Thaler and Empress Serena, sat at the head of the table, their expressions unreadable. "Daughter," Thaler began, his voice heavy with authority. "Explain yourself. Why have you brought a human into our sacred halls?" Lysara took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. "Father, Mother, I understand your concerns, but Kale is no ordinary human. He saved me when I was vulnerable, offered aid without hesitation, and showed me kindness when I least expected it. He represents qualities we should admire, not fear." The room erupted into whispers, some voices angry, others intrigued. Before anyone could argue further, a new voice cut through the chaos. "This is unacceptable," snapped Councillor Drevik, rising from his seat. "Humans are primitive beings, incapable of understanding our ways. Allowing him to remain will only sow discord among our people." Kale stepped forward, surprising everyone. "With respect, Councillor, perhaps discord isn't such a bad thing. Maybe it's time your people considered looking beyond yourselves to see what lies outside your borders." The chamber fell silent, stunned by his audacity. Lysara watched him, pride swelling in her chest despite the storm brewing around them. She realized then that bringing Kale here wasn't just about saving herself. It was about challenging the very foundations of her empire. And though the road ahead would be fraught with danger, she knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't face it alone. The next morning, Lysara found herself sitting cross-legged on the ground beside Kale, staring at the scattered pieces of her spacecraft. The wreckage was worse than she'd initially thought. Several critical components had been damaged beyond repair. She sighed inwardly, frustration bubbling beneath her composed exterior. Fixing it would take time, effort, and resources she didn't have. But as much as she hated to admit it, Kale seemed genuinely eager to help. "All right," he said, scratching his chin as he examined the ship's engine. "I'm no expert in alien tech, but I've worked with machines before. If you can explain how this thing works, maybe we can figure something out." Lysara hesitated. Sharing knowledge about Xylith technology went against everything she'd been taught. It was sacred, meant only for her people. Yet here she was, stranded on a foreign planet with no other options. Slowly, she began explaining the basics of her ship's systems, using simple terms that Kale might understand. To her surprise, he listened intently, nodding along and asking thoughtful questions. As they worked together, an uneasy truce formed between them. Lysara couldn't deny Kale's intelligence. Despite being human, he had a knack for problem-solving. Still, there were moments when she caught herself wondering why he bothered. Why waste his time helping someone like her? Was it curiosity, pity, or perhaps something else entirely? One evening, after hours of tinkering, Kale leaned back against a tree trunk, wiping sweat from his forehead. "You know," he said casually, "you're not what I expected." Lysara raised an eyebrow, her glowing markings dimming slightly in the fading light. "And what did you expect?" He chuckled. "Honestly, I thought you'd be more intimidating. You're royalty, right? Shouldn't you be ordering me around or something?" She blinked, taken aback by his candor. "Is that what your kind thinks of leaders? That we simply command others without question?" "Well, yeah," he admitted with a shrug. "At least where I come from. Humans aren't exactly known for doing things the easy way." Lysara studied him carefully, her curiosity piqued. For the first time, she realized how little she knew about humans, or any species outside her empire. Back home, they were dismissed as primitive beings incapable of true greatness. But Kale didn't seem primitive. In fact, the more she spoke with him, the more she saw glimpses of resilience and creativity. Over dinner, one of Kale's makeshift meals made from edible plants he'd gathered, she decided to learn more. "Tell me about Earth," she said abruptly, surprising even herself. Kale grinned, clearly pleased by her interest. "Earth's complicated," he began. "It's beautiful, messy, and full of contradictions. We've done terrible things, wars, pollution, greed, but we've also created incredible things. Art, music, science. Humanity's greatest strength is its ability to adapt, to keep moving forward no matter what." His words lingered in her mind long after their meal ended. There was passion in his voice, pride in his species' flaws and achievements alike. It was so different from the cold efficiency of Xylith culture, where emotions were often seen as weaknesses. "And what about you?" Lysara asked suddenly. "Why are you here, alone on this planet?" Kale hesitated, his smile faltering for the first time. "I guess I needed space," he admitted quietly. "Back home, I felt trapped. Everyone expected me to follow a certain path, to settle down, get a job, live a normal life. But that wasn't who I was. So I left. Out here, I'm free to explore, to discover new things, even if it means being alone." For a moment, Lysara felt a pang of understanding. Though their circumstances were vastly different, she too had felt the weight of expectations pressing down on her. As a princess, every decision she made was scrutinized, every action judged against centuries of tradition. "You're braver than you think," she said softly, surprising herself once again. Kale looked up, meeting her gaze. "So are you," he replied with a small smile. In that moment, Lysara realized that bridging two worlds wasn't just about fixing a broken ship. It was about finding common ground, about seeing past differences and discovering shared humanity. And though she still doubted whether she could fully trust Kale, she couldn't deny that his presence was changing her in ways she hadn't anticipated. The days following the trials of Unity were a whirlwind of tension and change within the Xylith Empire. Kale's performance had left an undeniable impression, but it wasn't enough to fully sway the council. While some members grudgingly acknowledged his worthiness, others remained staunchly opposed to granting him any form of acceptance. The divide among the council mirrored the growing unrest within the empire itself. A society built on tradition, now forced to confront the possibility of evolution. Lysara found herself torn between two worlds once again. On one hand, she was expected to uphold centuries of customs and maintain stability for her people. On the other, she couldn't ignore the spark of hope ignited by Cal's presence. His courage and determination had inspired whispers of admiration among younger Zaeliths, particularly those who yearned for reform. For the first time in generations, voices calling for change began to rise above the echoes of tradition. One evening, as Lysara walked through the palace gardens, Cal joined her, his footsteps soft against the crystalline pathways. They moved in silence for a moment, the weight of recent events hanging heavily between them. Finally, Cal broke the quiet. "You've been distant," he said gently. "Is everything okay?" Lysara hesitated before answering. I don't know what to do anymore. My people are divided because of me, because of you. Some see potential in what we could achieve together, while others fear losing everything that defines us." Cal nodded thoughtfully. "Change is hard. Back on Earth, progress never comes without resistance. But sometimes, taking a step forward means letting go of things that hold you back." She turned to face him, her glowing markings dimming slightly in the twilight. "And what if taking that step costs me everything? What if choosing you means losing my family, my title, my home?" He reached out, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "Then you'll still have me. And maybe something even better than what you're leaving behind." His words lingered in her mind, planting seeds of doubt about the life she'd always known. Was her duty to the throne truly more important than her own happiness, than the future she envisioned with Cal? The turning point came unexpectedly. During a private meeting with the council, Cal uncovered evidence of corruption buried deep within their ranks. Documents revealed secret alliances with rival factions, deals made at the expense of the Empire's safety. When he presented these findings to Emperor Thidler, the room erupted into chaos. "How dare you meddle in our affairs?" Councillor Drevik shouted, slamming his fist on the table. But Thidler raised a hand, silencing the uproar. "Enough. This information cannot be ignored. If true, it threatens the very foundation of our empire." Lysara watched as Cal stood tall, unflinching under the weight of scrutiny. "I didn't come here to cause trouble," he said firmly. "I came to help Lysara and your people. Ignoring this won't make it disappear." In the days that followed, investigations exposed the extent of the betrayal, forcing several high-ranking officials to step down. The scandal sent shockwaves through the empire, leaving many questioning the infallibility of their leaders. Amidst the turmoil, support for Cal grew, not universally, but significantly. As Lysara observed the shifting dynamics, she began to see Cal in a new light. He wasn't just someone brave or kind. He was a catalyst for transformation. His actions reminded her that leadership wasn't about clinging to power, but about guiding her people toward a brighter future. Late one night, after another exhausting day of debates and decisions, Lysara approached Cal in the observatory tower. Together, they gazed out at the stars, their reflections shimmering in the glass. "I understand now," she said softly, "why you stayed, why you fought so hard. It wasn't just for me. It was for all of us." Cal smiled faintly, his eyes meeting hers. "You deserve someone who believes in you, someone who sees your strength, even when you can't." For the first time, Lysara allowed herself to believe she might be worthy of such devotion. With Cal by her side, she realized anything was possible, even bridging the vast chasm between their worlds. The council chamber was quieter than usual when Lysara entered, her heart pounding as she approached the grand table. Today marked the culmination of weeks of debate, trials, and revelations, a decision that would shape not only her future, but the fate of the Xylith Empire itself. Before her sat Emperor Thidler, Empress Serena, and the remaining council members, their faces unreadable masks of authority. Cal stood beside her, his expression calm yet resolute, his presence a testament to everything they had endured together. "Princess Lysara," Thidler began, his voice steady and commanding. "You have brought before us an unprecedented challenge, a human who has proven himself capable, yet remains an outsider to our ways. Now you must choose. Will you ascend to the throne as queen, upholding the traditions of our people, or will you renounce your title to pursue a life with this individual? Lysara's breath caught in her throat. She had known this moment would come, yet hearing it aloud made the weight of her choice unbearable. If she chose the throne, she could guide her people through the turmoil they faced, uniting them under a single vision. But doing so would mean leaving Kale behind, exiling him from her life forever. On the other hand, choosing Kale meant abandoning her duty, severing ties with her family, and risking the stability of the empire. Could she live with the guilt of turning her back on her people? Kale placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, sensing her inner turmoil. "Whatever you decide, I'll stand by you," he whispered softly. Her mind raced, weighing the consequences of each path. As much as she loved Kale, she couldn't ignore the responsibility she bore as a leader. Yet, deep down, she knew one truth above all else. True leadership wasn't about sacrificing happiness for duty. It was about finding balance between the two. Taking a deep breath, Lysara stepped forward, addressing the council with unwavering determination. "I will not abandon my people or my place as their ruler. But neither will I turn away from Kale. He has shown me that progress comes not from clinging to tradition, but from embracing change. Together, we can forge a new alliance, not just between humans and Zealoths, but within our own empire." The room erupted into murmurs, some voices outraged, others intrigued. Councillor Drevik rose abruptly, his face flushed with anger. "This is unacceptable. You cannot allow such chaos to take root in our sacred halls." Before the argument could escalate further, Empress Serena raised her hand, silencing the chamber. Her gaze softened as she looked at her daughter. "Lysara, are you certain of this path? It will not be easy, for you or for us." "I am certain," Lysara replied firmly. "Our empire stands at a crossroads. We can continue down the same road, blind to the flaws within our system, or we can embrace a new era of unity and understanding. Kale represents hope, a bridge to worlds beyond our own. By accepting him, we open ourselves to possibilities we've never imagined." Thelor leaned back in his chair, studying his daughter intently. After a long pause, he nodded slowly. "Very well. If this is your decision, then we will support it. But on one condition." "What condition?" Lysara asked, her pulse quickening. "That you work to establish peace, not only within our borders but also with neighboring civilizations. Prove to us, and to our people, that this alliance is worth the risk." Relief washed over Lysara, though she understood the magnitude of what lay ahead. Turning to Kale, she saw pride and admiration shining in his eyes. For the first time, she felt truly free, not bound by tradition, but empowered by the belief that she could shape her own destiny. Later that evening, as they stood together on the palace balcony overlooking the glowing cityscape, Kale broke the silence. "So, what happens now?" Lysara smiled faintly, her bioluminescent markings shimmering like stars against the night sky. "Now we build something new, something better." Hand in hand, they gazed out at the horizon, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them. Together, the months that followed Lysara's decision were a whirlwind of change, both within the Xyloth Empire and beyond its borders. True to her promise, she worked tirelessly to bridge the gap between humans and Zealoths, forging alliances that once seemed impossible. Kale became her closest advisor, his insights into human culture proving invaluable in negotiations with Earth's leaders. Together, they crafted a vision for the future, one rooted in mutual respect, understanding, and cooperation. At first, progress was slow. Many Zealoth nobles resisted the idea of aligning with humans, viewing them as inferior and unworthy of trust. But Lysara refused to back down. She organized cultural exchanges, inviting ambassadors from Earth to visit the Empire and share their knowledge, art, and traditions. In return, she sent Zealoth scholars to study humanity's resilience and creativity. Slowly but surely, Attitudes began to shift. Younger generations embraced the changes, inspired by Cal's courage and Lysara's determination. One of their greatest achievements came when news reached the Empire of an impending threat, a neighboring warlord who sought to exploit the Zealoths' internal divisions. Faced with potential invasion, Lysara proposed an unprecedented alliance, uniting Earth's military forces with the Zealoth defense fleet. The Council balked at the suggestion, but Cal's calm reasoning swayed even the most skeptical members. "If we fight alone, we risk losing everything," he argued during a heated meeting. "But if we stand together, we can protect what matters most, not just your empire, but the hope of peace between our species." His words resonated deeply, and the Council reluctantly agreed. When the warlord launched his attack, the combined strength of humans and Zealoths proved unstoppable. Advanced technology merged seamlessly with strategic ingenuity, turning the tide of battle in their favor. Victory came at a cost, but it solidified the bond between the two civilizations, proving that unity could triumph over division. As the dust settled, Lysara stood alongside Cal on the palace balcony, watching as fireworks lit up the night sky, a celebration of their hard-won victory. Below them, crowds cheered, their voices blending harmoniously despite their differences. It was a moment neither of them would ever forget. "You did it," Cal said quietly, his tone filled with awe. "You brought them together." Lysara shook her head, smiling softly. "We did it. This isn't just my victory. It's ours." For the first time in her life, she felt truly at peace. The weight of expectation no longer burdened her. Instead, she carried the hopes of two worlds united under one shared dream. And though challenges still lay ahead, she knew they could face anything as long as they faced it together. That evening, during a private ceremony, Emperor Thaler formally acknowledged Cal's contributions to the Empire. "Though you are not of our blood," he declared, placing a ceremonial medallion around Cal's neck, "you have earned a place among us. From this day forward, you are an honorary son of the Zealoth Empire." Tears welled in Lysara's eyes as she watched the scene unfold. Her people had come so far, from rejecting Cal outright to embracing him as family. It was proof that even the deepest divides could be bridged with patience, compassion, and perseverance. Later that night, as they strolled through the gardens hand in hand, Cal turned to her with a mischievous grin. "So, does this mean I finally get to call you my queen?" Lysara laughed, the sound light and musical. "Only if you promise to keep reminding me why I chose you." He pulled her close, his gaze warm and tender. Every single day, underneath the shimmering stars, surrounded by the hum of a thriving empire, Lysara realized she had found something far greater than duty or tradition. She had found love, a love that transcended boundaries, defied expectations, and gave rise to a hopeful future for all. And as they looked out at the endless expanse of the universe, Lysara knew their journey was only beginning.